Hi folks, Florida Man here, bringing you my Basics of Italy, Secondo. If you've been having a successful game thus far, it's at around this point, where we left off in the last video, that you'll start to have trouble with something that would have been, paradoxically, much easier earlier in the game, but also much less useful strategically at that time. And that is crossing the stalemate line. The trouble will be either because England is still active in the Mid-Atlantic and Iberian region, and Russia and Germany are active on land, and they are inherently obstacles to progressing through the north-south stalemate line, or because they've actually identified you as a solo threat, and they're taking deliberate, conscious action accordingly. If you have been identified as a solo threat, this can be a big problem for Italy, since England will usually have ample time to secure the Mid-Atlantic and Portugal before you can commit units to going north by sea, and Germany or Russia usually have a larger land presence than Italy, even a strong Italy, unless they've been having significant trouble that's not directly attributable to you. The best thing for you in this mid-game period, then, is that England, Germany, and Russia have been doing a lot of infighting and backstabbing each other, ignoring you. As Italy, you should have started actively pushing this at an earlier point. You should also have a strong rapport with each of the surviving powers by now. This will be helped by the fact that you'll hopefully have worked with each of them on one enemy or another by this point. The ideal to strive for is either that the three players, or at least two of them, are too frustrated with each other to join forces, and possibly that two or three of them like and trust you. If the first opponents you fought were Turkey and Austria, your ally is probably Russia. In that case, you should suggest that you and Russia advance west, trying to get Russia to build northern fleets and attack the German and English regions while you move against France. You should try and get the Balkans regions and Turkey turned into DMZs, or at least areas where Russian units aren't sitting on standby, under the rationale that you both need to focus on your respective opponents rather than keeping units busy guarding each other. If you succeed in doing that, you only need to advance part of the way against France, into Marseille or Spain, before you could turn on Russia, who will hopefully have been having a harder time advancing in their own sphere. You could even stab Russia before you make progress against France, if you believe you're in danger of losing the race to get large enough for the stab otherwise. If you do that, you will be announcing your solo intentions to the whole board though, so proceed with caution. If your first opponents were Turkey and France, you might have connections with England, Germany, and or Russia, so you have more of a selection of possible allies for the middle and late game. I think keeping on good terms with Germany tends to be a good play in these circumstances, for reasons that I'll delve into in greater detail in my final video on the basics of playing as Italy. That means you could attack England or Russia, depending on which seems more or less friendly, and what Germany wants to do. So I recommend you remain flexible in how you think about these maneuvers, and keep an open mind. If your first opponents were France and then England, you'll probably have to deal with a juggernaut in the east, or something that resembles the juggernaut in fact if not in name at this point. You should be strong enough to do it, especially if your alliance with Germany is strong and you haven't neglected your defenses in the east. However, the ideal is that your enemies will not have actually consolidated the east, because if you're on the defensive against them it probably means you're not actually going to solo, just try to hold out and get into the draw. So do your best to sow discord in the east if you're sending your units all the way west, and be willing to commit a few units to tipping the balance of power back and forth in that area. Try to get Germany to do the same, so the two of you will already have a strong influence in that region by the time England is gone. This will probably be difficult if Austria, Russia, or Turkey is an especially strong player, of course, but it's your best way of trying to avoid a draw when you employ the strategy of committing west early. If your first opponents were France and Austria, there will still very possibly be a mildly strong juggernaut going to the east, and you will probably have a living England in the west, either threatening you or distracting Germany. So this becomes a pretty complex situation, and you have to use your negotiation skills to try and break Turkey and Russia up, if you haven't already, or to get Germany and England attacking Russia together. That might be able to tip the game in your favor if you'd otherwise get invaded by the juggernaut at this point. Then you can hopefully force your way across the Balkans toward the Russian homeland, or sneak through the Mid-Atlantic Ocean toward England. The key thing that is invariable, regardless of these combinations of opponents and alliances, is to never fully pull back from a front with an upcoming enemy. Even if your enemy extracts a promise from you to do so, you should remember where you need to begin moving forward in the next year or so. Don't let yourself be pushed into throwing everything in one direction and removing your ability to quickly pivot and stab the person you were temporarily at peace with. Since Italy is in the center, and more than most powers it has a tendency to move back and forth across the map, losing momentum as it goes. I think it's important to remind players at this point that you should always be thinking about where your units need to be a year or two from now. That's the best way to make sure you won't abandon any region that you'll subsequently realize you actually needed to have fully invaded and fortified. Even if you want to withdraw a couple of units, 1 or 2 spaces, in order to placate someone who's worried about your growth, you should be waiting and looking for your moment to push toward the now demilitarized border. That's how you're going to get across that stalemate line, which is the only way to reach the solo that you've worked so hard to achieve, the solo that is so elusive for Italy. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope it gave you food for thought in considering your game as Italy. I'd like to briefly thank the people whose names now appear on screen, who are responsible for preparing the subtitles we have on the videos that have them. They've prepared more subtitles than I've even been able to adequately add so far, and they're a very helpful bunch of hobbyists. And if you like what we're doing here at Florida Man Diplomacy, you can support it by liking, subscribing, and commenting below. If you really feel like you're getting a lot of value from the channel, I hope you'll consider visiting my Patreon or Ko-Fi. My blog, Discord, Patreon, and Ko-Fi are linked below. Until next time, Florida Man out.